Main purpose for this channel right now is awareness for everyone out there, mainly for the youth, mainly for my generation. I want to target them and people that are upcoming and that are being raised in this society, in our society. And over these past few years, I have gained some knowledge, seen things, absorbed a lot of things that I think is very important for our humanity, our community, and our way of life. My name is Santiago. I'm from Colombia. I live in the States right now. Recently, like about, I would say 4 years ago, I got diagnosed with leukemia, a rare leukemia that was found in my body, my bloodstream. I underwent treatment, of course. Then I got a transplant, a bone marrow transplant from my brother. Everything went well, but then like a year and a half later, I relapsed. I underwent treatment again, and then as time went by, I got another donor, an unrelated donor, and I got a second bone marrow transplant. And that was pretty much this year. And unfortunately, it's been about 4 months since that transplant happened. And I talked to my doctors, and they said there was no more help or anything they could really give me to give me more life in this earth, in this planet. So for me, death is a real thing right now. And it's something, one of the topics I would like to cover, because I've noticed people don't really like to go into the subject so much, and I really think that's an important subject. Not to dwell on, but to think about, to analyze about. That's me, that has been these recent years. Now, my mindset started changing about this world the first time I got diagnosed, and my brother, he showed me these videos, which I definitely recommended, not videos, documentaries, in Netflix, called Zeitgeist. It was the Zeitgeist trilogy, and it just opened my eyes. It opened my eyes to different things that I hadn't seen, I hadn't comprehended, and probably things that I didn't even want to think about. I considered myself a good student. I was very productive in school, in my academics. I would be strict with grades and with A's, and I would get very competitive with my friends. When I got diagnosed, that changed quite a lot because, I got out of my own bubble. I needed to get out of school. I needed to go to a hospital. I needed to be in the hospital for treatment. That kind of led me to get closer to the real world. At my young age, I'm 16 years old. That time I was about 13, 14 years old. And I've seen things that most people don't see every day. I've seen people die. I've known people that have died. I know kids that, they died too soon and they were too young. This has gotten me really connected with just the real world, the adult world, the thing that is out there. Mainly, what you see when you graduate, mainly what you see when you are actually out there and you interact with people, real life things. One of the things I could say that impacted me the most was one day at clinic. I saw a kid that didn't have an eye. He was just playing in the floor, but he wouldn't take his hand off that eye that he didn't have for at all. He wouldn't take it off. And that just impacted me, and it's crazy that some of the things you see. When I saw these documentaries, it just opened my mind to the society we live in. We live in a society where we know what we eat is shit, We know the way we are living is shit sometimes. We know that what's happening around us is shit. And most of us don't want to think about it. And the thing is, we have to know that all these things that scientists talk about, all these things that we hear in documentaries, they're not only relevant in past history, and they're not only relevant with nature and plants, As they're relevant with nature, they interact with us as well, so they affect our humanity and our race so much. And many of us just don't like to think about it, and we like to be in our own bubble. And I definitely understand many people who just don't want to think about it, because it is a very cruel, foul, disgusting, yet beautiful, nurturing world that we live in. And that's just the truth of it, you know. I've learned to be open-minded with anything, you know. There's different things that people need to learn in this society, pretty much. I think people need to learn how to see things with different perspective, you know. People need to learn to be open-minded. People need to learn to let go of their ego. Actually, I do this weird thing. I recently started it when I was looking at documentaries. I would just get my phone, because everything you kind of see in the world is knowledge, and documentaries are even more. They're straight up, and especially some that just really give you things that you don't hear about. I thought probably I'm not going to remember most of the stuff I see here, so I said I'm going to start texting myself things that I would like to remember. So actually here I have a few things that I just texted myself, and different things that I would like to go over. So first thing is ego, that I had mentioned before. You know, many of us have egos, and the ego, I think, lies in the boundary of older people, because of course older people have experiences, they have knowledge, and sometimes they get carried away with that knowledge, that they get too much ego. And not only in the educational aspect do I say this, I mean this also in stardom. Like people who are famous, they also undergo this ego. And it's very hard to see those type of people be very humble. Yet there are a lot of people who exist that are famous and that are humble. I think adults, and even kids too, even when you spark up an argument, you have to know when you're wrong, and you have to know when to listen. Even if you think that the person in front of you might be completely wrong, might say the weirdest crap of life, you have to analyze their point of view. Even though if you don't even analyze, just listen. Just listen. Even if you know you're right, you just need to listen. And at the end, if you know there's no convincing, if you know there's no talking, if you know there's no interacting, that's where you know that you shouldn't waste your time with that person. You listened, you got, and maybe that person didn't listen back, won't listen back. That's when you should end it. That's when you should keep on going. And I think ego interacts in our society, especially in schools, with some teachers that just think they're really correct, and maybe sometimes they could be, I'm not saying they aren't, but maybe sometimes they should be more open-minded, you know. In the great words of the great philosopher Jiddu Krishnamurti, I've actually seen some of his YouTube videos, which I recommend. He says many of the people, you know, in our society have to learn how to let go of their experiences and their knowledge, and that's how they will learn more from different people. Because if people have too much ego, they will never let themselves be open to new knowledge. And then I'll elaborate later more on that. Something else I want to get into is the main topic about death. Death is pretty much something that our society sees and conditions us pretty much with an awkward topic. It's not something that people like to talk about, and of course it's reasonable that people don't like to talk about death. But with all the things I've absorbed and I've seen, I've been able to see death in new eyes, with a new perspective, and I've been able to see death with curiosity, you know. Many of us are scared of it, and that's why we don't think about it. And that's why we live in our bubble. There's a famous phrase that everyone says, you know, you have to live your day as if it were your last. But even though many people say it and repeat it, and even though I've tried my best to live it, it's really hard. That routine in this world that we have is very deadly, especially because, you know, people get up, they go to work, and then they come back home, and then they sleep, and then they get up, go to work, sleep, get up, go to work, sleep. And it continues to be a routine, and people don't really live. I think people should really know how to live their life to the fullest and each day. But you know, we have a society that conditions us differently, you know. I really like to see things in a philosophical manner and try to interact and with things in my mind the most simple way as possible. So I challenge you guys to ask, to question. That's very important. I love to tell people to question, because that's something that people have really just learned to not do. Many of us just learn that they're born in this world and they just go with the system. They think that the system is there, we're born in it, and that's what we're supposed to go. And that's where comes the conventional system, the conventional education, conventional everything. And it's just like reading a book. All of us have the misconception that we should read an entire book. And now, before anyone goes crazy on me, I know if it's a narrative, if it's a trilogy, if it's a fiction, definitely. But if it's a non-fiction and if it's pure facts, you don't really have to read the whole book. You can really skim through it, and a book can be like a friend. It's just like another great guy that I was able to find on YouTube called Ty Lopez. He describes his way of reading books by skimming them, and he says books are friends, and that is so true. Books are friends, and they're always going to be there, and you can always go back and look, but you never really have to. That's a big misconception of really having to finish a whole book. And if you think about it, if you rely on that tactic to read books, then you can read a bunch more books and have a lot more knowledge. Now back to my topic of death. I think people should really think about it. They should really see death in a different eyes. And I think people should really look into psychedelics. I think it opens a new world to people. Now, I'm not a druggie, or I'm not a person that, you know, does cocaine or does many of these things, but I've read books on it, I've seen documentaries about it, I've talked to people, and it just opens your eyes to a different realm, to different things. And, you know, I would be ignorant to say that there isn't nothing on the other side. So I think these things, these natural things, not drugs that get manipulated on the streets, these things that come from forests, these natural medicines can open people's minds to see death as a new curiosity. Unfortunately, I don't want to be the guy with bad news, but everyone's going to die. We all have a due date. For me, it's very real, but I think I'm living like a person is supposed to be living, because in a sense, if my death is tomorrow, today, next week, and when I'm 80, 70, I still want to live life to, you know, to the fullest. You don't know if today you're going to get out, you're going to trip, fall, maybe get a deadly injury, maybe get run over by a car, people say, because you really don't know what's going to happen. And many people have the misconception with that, again, I mentioned with the routine. People get accustomed to a routine, and that routine is very deadly, again, because people think that eventually they're immortal, they forget that. And then things like, let's say, a disease that happens to me, that's when people really open their eyes. That's when people really think about life in different ways, and that's very unfortunate. And I think we should really try to fix that. Try to change your routine up every day. Try to, you know, if you go to school a certain way, try to go to school with a different route. Try to do different things. Maybe incorporate it in your routine if you can't really change your routine, you know. I don't think people should ignore the facts about life, you know. People shouldn't ignore death, and I know teachers and adults mainly do it for the risk of depression, of kids being scared, but I think people should approach it differently. People should see it as an evolution, pretty much as us going into different realms, experimenting something different, and shouldn't be scared for it. Now I'm going to go back to society and the conventional system. I want to go into education. And I'm not saying that our education system is super bad, but it is pretty not good. So as I grew up in gifted programs and programs for kids who were supposedly smarter than the rest based on some tests. And the thing with our system now is it gets to a point where we aren't learning, and it's pretty much memorization. And many of you might think that's learning, but it's not learning, because ask a kid what he learned last year in his grade, and probably he won't even tell you the whole thing because he already forgot. We live in a system, an educational system, that our youth, it gets very competitive. And I think the thing to blame for that is the grading system. And there's that thing to pursue that straight A's. And I mean, it's not bad. But again, it gets to a point where people aren't learning. They are pretty much absorbing information, memorizing it, and just doing it for a test just to get that A. But they're not looking at the content, and the content is always what's important. You always want to know, history. You always want to keep that. You always, what's the point of learning international history? It's to know and to understand our current problems. It's not to ace the final exam. Try to change your view on it, especially since I come from a form of friends that we all kind of compete to have straight A's, to be those great students, and then we lose the main purpose of school. What's the main purpose of school? The main purpose of school is to learn. And what's the main purpose of learning? It's not to get good grades. Unfortunately, that is not it. And I'm going to tell you guys that. That's not what learning is about. Learning is about, getting information that's going to help you understand the world. Going to help you pretty much know why things are like they are, right? And when you have a good understanding of why things are the way that they are, you can incorporate your own inventions. Really encourage you guys to check out this guy called Tai Lopez. He was a guy who pretty much didn't have a college degree, but he made it. Right now, he's living in Hollywood. He has successful companies, and he's doing videos right now on YouTube to basically tell you and give you lessons on how to make it. Our school system isn't the only system out there. Many people think that, but it's not. I saw a TED Talks recently about a young boy that his parents got him out of the regular school system, put him in a new school system somewhere here in the States. I'm not exactly sure. The thing about it was so amazing because his school system consisted of different things. It consisted of him going outside, getting internships, and connecting himself with nature. And he was quite young, I don't know, 11 or 12 years old. And I think our school system is lacking a lot of that. Right now, I think you guys have to really think about things that you're not thinking about with our school system. Or where the school plan or the yearly plan our teachers get to teach us comes from, right? You guys should ask yourselves that question. Where does our education system start off? Where does this information that people tell us come from?